This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America as we kick off yet another week. Thanks for joining us. We're here every weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Coming up on today's show, regular visit from Mike Penna, Horse Racing Radio Network. They were down broadcasting live at Gulfstream on Saturday, so we'll touch on some of the Gulfstream races with Mike. Also go out and get his thoughts on the Risen Star as well. A little later on in the show, we'll be joined by Andy Serling, get some of his thoughts on the stakes action also from the weekend, but we'll also get a couple ideas for Aqueduct for this afternoon. All of that coming up. Speaking of racing on the weekend, how things shook out as far as the Kentucky Derby leaderboard and as far as some of the pundits and how they may have changed things up. Had Jenny Reese on yesterday on Loose on the Lead. Jenny Reese of the Louisville Courier-Journal. Every Sunday morning they put out the Kentucky Derby media poll. It includes voters like John Asher at Churchill Downs, Dave Grenig from the Racing Forum, Jenny Reese herself. Mike is a voter, Mike Penna, Gary West also on board, and a few others in there. And as Jenny said, it was kind of interesting when we talked to her yesterday. Top billing, despite the third place finish, held on to second place in the poll when it came out yesterday. Kentucky Derby poll from the Courier-Journal. Cairo Prince remained at number one, no surprise there. But really the top four did not juggle up. Cairo Prince, Top Billing, Honor Code, Candy Boy. Honor Code is maybe, at 3 to me, is maybe rated a little high given the fact we've talked about it before, perhaps a little bit behind the 8 ball. But where things did change up was a little further down the list. We did have 3 additions. And don't forget, since this list comes out on Sunday, they had not yet seen last week the results, obviously, of Monday's Southwest. So showing up on this week's poll were Tapiture, the winner of the Southwest. He appears at number 6 in the top 10. Intense Holiday, who won down at Fairgrounds, is number 5 now in the Courier-Journal poll, and Wildcat Red makes an appearance at number 10 off the Fountain of Youth victory. That means being knocked out of the top 10, Commissioner, Vickers in Trouble, and Shared Belief. Vickers in Trouble, given the wide post position, it's still a pretty good effort down at the Fairgrounds in the Risen Star, just barely knocked out of the poll. He winds up at number 11. Constitution, off of the win on Saturday in the undercard race, is number 12 on the Courier-Journal's list. But Shared Belief, I'm looking here, Shared Belief number 14 now. And at least Honor Code, they're kind of pointing to a race, and they've been to the track for a workout at least, but I think things are still a little dicey for Honor Code. Shared Belief, even more dicey though, so not surprising that he got knocked out of the top 10 in the Courier-Journal media poll. And as noted, Vickers in Trouble just got knocked a little bit. Commissioner, on the other hand, Commissioner drops 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Commissioner now number 18 on the Courier-Journal poll. And I have to count because the top 10 are listed numerically, and then the rest are just listed in order of the votes received. So Commissioner at 18, a pretty steep drop out of the top 10. So there's the Courier-Journal poll. As far as the leaderboard, points-wise, certainly we have some horses who are guaranteed spots now, no question about it. Top of the list now as far as Kentucky Derby points, Intense Holiday off of the victory down at the Fairgrounds. And again, this weekend started the 50-point races. Prior to this, they were 20-point event, or excuse me, they were 10-point events. They were 10, 4, 2, and 1 going to first, second, third, and fourth. But now we've entered the 50-point realm with winners getting 50, second 20, third 10, and fourth 5 points. So a big 50-point weekend for Intense Holiday kicks him up to number 1 on the points leaders list with 53. Wildcat Red now sitting with 50. And then it takes a pretty good drop. Obviously, there was only 2 50-pointers handed out this weekend, but Albano now sits third on the Kentucky points list, 24. Tapiture, 22. A couple of horses at 5 and 6. Vickers in Trouble and General A-Rod with 20. And then we have 3 horses with 14 points. Savannah, Cairo Prince, and Honor Code. And 14 would have gotten you in last year. And again, that was the first year of this point system. Things have shaken up. They tweaked it a little bit this year. We'll have to see if it holds up. But last year, 14 got you in, and 6 points was the first horse on the AE list last year. But right now, currently, number 20, and in fact, 20, 21, and 13 through 21 are tied with 10 points. So just to give you an idea, if it was cut off today at 20 or 21, 10 points would be the cutoff. And again, top billing sitting at 21, but with those 10 points, I'm guessing there's some kind of tiebreakers involved there in parsing out horses with the same points. But there is where it stands right now as far as the Kentucky Derby points leaderboard. Over on the Kentucky Oaks side, Untappable off the nice big weekend win at 60 points right now, only for you, also with 60 points, the Todd Pletcher runner who won over at Gulfstream on the weekend. Got Lucky, 24, House Rules, 20. Rhea Antonia with 15 points right now. But there's the look at the top 5 in the Kentucky Oaks points leaderboard. Looking at some of the weekend results and how horses came out of it, where they may be going next over at the fairgrounds. The Intense Holiday Camp seems like they will be headed back to the Louisiana Derby. Todd Pletcher's trainee, Starlight owned, went right back to his base at Palm Meadows, back over there. Pletcher said, I think he arrived back here in excellent condition, and he says it would make a lot of sense to go back to the Louisiana Derby. That's their first option, according to Pletcher. So it looks like Intense Holiday on the way back to the Louisiana Derby. Albano, very gutsy in defeat down there in the Risen Star. Looks like he'll be back for Larry Jones. Larry Jones says, don't see any reason for tucking tail and trying another racetrack. All seems good with him this morning. That was yesterday, the day after the race. Connections of third place finisher Vickers in Trouble have not made any definitive plans yet. And I thought it was a good finish for him, given the fact that he was hung out in that outside post position, number 13, on Saturday. Fourth place finisher Opportunity for Bob Baffert. Really a lightly raced runner, so there's probably still some upside potential there. And Baffert's assistant, Opportunity heads back to California, but Baffert's assistant gave a hint that Opportunity seemed to like the track, so they might be headed back to the Louisiana Derby. And the horse that I was kind of tilting towards a little bit in the Risen Star, Gold Hawk, I was hoping for a little rebound from him. Trainer Steve Asmussen said most likely would return in the Louisiana Derby. I kind of hypothesized yesterday, wouldn't shock me at all to see them maybe aim for, you know, some of these lesser races. You know, this was a horse that maybe would wind up in the Derby trial, a good performance there, maybe move on to the Preakness, or maybe stick to the second level derbies as the year progresses, because same connections have Tapiture. So I think they've already got a horse that they know is solidly on the Kentucky Derby trail. Gold Hawk off the last couple, maybe not so much. But I talked to Jenny Reese yesterday. She made a good point. Really, at this point, I don't know that there's too many secondary options for Gold Hawk. So maybe it makes just as much sense to continue to forge ahead, at least for another race or so. And it looks like Steve Asmussen most likely headed back to the Louisiana Derby with Gold Hawk. According to the Racing Form article, Asmussen says, I'm just a little out of sync with him right now, meaning Gold Hawk. I think we can be in better shape. And again, off of that win a couple of races back, Gold Hawk, I think he's got more talent than we've seen in the last couple of races. So let's see if maybe Steve Asmussen can get the ship righted. And again, it looks like he may be back in the Louisiana Derby. Coming out of the Fountain of Youth on Saturday, Wildcat Red, his trainer says most likely coming back in the Florida Derby. And we talked about this yesterday. I talked about it with Jeff Carl yesterday on the Handicappers Report. On first blush, the breeding maybe looks a little sprint met, certainly on the top end, but Jeff was looking up the dam, and the dam has some winds at some much longer distances, so we may be overlooking the breeding, may be a little sneakier with Wildcat Red. Obviously, the track as it played on Saturday played to his running style, both he and General A-Rod. But it was a nice effort. I liked Wildcat Red, talked about him a little bit on the show last week, coming off of that Hutchison win. I thought he was going to be set up very nicely to run well on Saturday. He did, really gutsy stretch run. Will he stretch out? That's yet to be seen. But if they're going to stretch further, why not do it right at Gulfstream, which seems to be conducive to his style. On the other hand, horses like General A-Rod, Mike Maker says his next start is undecided. It would seem, given that how well he ran, that they would come back at Gulfstream as well. On the other hand, Shug McGahee, quoted about Top Billing, said he was disappointed Top Billing didn't win on Saturday, but he wasn't disappointed with the effort. Mile and a 16th with the short pole, short stretch. He thought Top Billing put in a pretty good effort. He now says the Florida Derby is a possibility, but the Grade 1 Wood at Aqueduct is under serious consideration. So this is one, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out as we get closer to the Florida Derby time, which connections of horses are maybe shopping around for a track that is a little more conducive to the running style of their horse, particularly a horse like Top Billing. So it wouldn't be a shock at all to see Shug and Top Billing wind up in New York for the Wood Memorial, which you would have to guess is going to be a little more conducive to his style. Older division, article out of the Racing Form within the past day notes that with the presence of Mucho Macho Man and Will Take Charge, according to the headline, says might scare rivals away from the big cap, Santa Anita Handicap coming up on March 8th. But then they list a field of 8 or 9 as being possible with Game On Dude, Blingo, Imperative, Appealing Tale, Rousing Storm, American Blend, Majestic Harbor, some players out in that handicap division out in Southern California as being potential entrants in the big cap. And, you know, the headline says may scare away rivals. I'm just not sure who else we might expect in there, really. I think that's a pretty logical set of runners that will likely show up for the $750,000 race. But certainly all attention will be on Mucho Macho Man and Will Take Charge. And so long as they, and at least a few others, so you get a legitimate race in there. But if you get a field of at least 7, let's say, and if it does turn out to be this 8 or 9, but as long as Mucho Macho Man and Will Take Charge are in there with a potential replay on the same track, potential replay of the nice Breeders' Cup Classic run, it's going to be a race that's going to attract a lot of attention. Do want to note there are a couple of votes coming up in Massachusetts this week that really could define the future of racing in Massachusetts. There is a vote on Tuesday that would allow Mohegan Sun to continue with a bid for a resort casino on land owned by Suffolk Downs. On Friday, that vote is on Tuesday. On Friday, the Racing Commission up there is scheduled to award a single slots parlor license in Massachusetts. That will potentially have some indications as to the future of Plain Ridge Racetrack. Both Suffolk Downs and Plain Ridge the owners are tilting towards the potential of closing racetracks if things don't go their way as far as slots or casino. So this things are shaping up over the next 5 days to really, as I say, define racing a little bit in Massachusetts. We'll keep our eyes on both of those situations out there. The vote tomorrow, the referendum in Revere about a resort casino at Suffolk Downs, and then on Friday, the Racing Commission deciding where they will put a slots parlor. So a little dicey out there in Massachusetts, and again, we'll keep our eyes on that moving forward. And just wanted to note, I talked a little bit about it on Loose on the Lead yesterday, but for folks who weren't tuned in there was some, obviously over the past few days, there's been some feedback on the announcement of Del Mar moving to dirt. There was an article by Bill Finley in the Thoroughbred Daily News. He talks about the safety factor of synthetic surfaces and questions why people are so eager to get rid of these when it's been proven that synthetic surfaces are safer. I kind of question his contention. I'm not sure that is sealed science yet. I noted yesterday when I talked about it, I think the comparisons, the studies that have been done so far have been done on fairly new, because they're all fairly new, synthetic racetracks. And I think the comparisons are then being done against dirt racetracks that maybe have been around for years and years. And let's see the wear and tear on synthetic racetracks before we dub them a panacea for safety. And in fact, later in the Finley article, he even notes that in recent years, the numbers as far as injuries and fatalities for horses at Del Mar haven't been particularly good. And the Del Mar surface, one of the reasons they're switching is because they've said their synthetic surface is aged enough, they would probably have to pull that up and redo it one way or the other. So as I say, there's some give and take. There was a Steve Christ article looking at Keeneland as being the last major track out there with a synthetic surface and what that means for them and if dirt is in their future. Again, that was an article written within the last 2 or 3 days by Steve Christ. You can find that at the Racing Forum. And then there was an article from the Courier Journal. Jenny Reese wrote it. She reached out to the Keeneland folks to find out, in light of what's come up in the past week or so, what their future may hold. And the Keeneland folks are sticking with Polytrack, at least for right now. The Keeneland spokesperson says, "We understand and appreciate the decision of Del Mar to return to a dirt racing surface, but at Keeneland, our mission has always been about providing racing at the highest level. Part of that mission and critical to the growth of our sport is to provide the safest racing surface possible." And so they're claiming to still be committed to the Polytrack at Keeneland. So we'll see how things shake out. Again, that was an interesting announcement from Del Mar, and it does leave Keeneland as a major racetrack as a little bit of an island unto themselves. But there's been pros and cons from the pundits and the fans over the past few days. All right, we'll take our first break. When we come back, it will be Mike Penna, the Horse Racing Radio Network. Take a little look back at some of the stakes action from this past weekend. Stay tuned. All of that when Racing Across America continues.
I'm Mark Cassano. Join me Saturday mornings at 10 for Down the Stretch. We'll inform, analyze, and welcome in the biggest names in racing. So join me Saturday mornings at 10 for Down the Stretch, right here on the OTB Television Network.
I got it. Watch me. I got it. Hey! I got something that makes me want to shout. I got something that tells me what it's all about. I got a move that tells me what to do. If you don't, brothers and sisters, then you won't know what it's all about.
Here in upstate New York, no one provides bettors with more wagering options than Capital OTB. Our network of branch and easy bet locations stretches from the mid-Hudson Valley all the way to the Canadian border and west to central New York. So whether you need to place a bet, fund your Capital Bets account, or watch the next big race, all the action is just around the corner. A full list of our branch and easy bet locations can be found online at capitalotb.com. Capital OTB, the better and most convenient choice for wagering in upstate New York.
Wagering at CapitalOTBBet.com is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Capital Bet TV, the fastest and easiest online wagering experience where you can monitor 5 different tracks simultaneously. 2. Capital Bet Express. Its straightforward program layout and interactive handicapping information lets you build your wager quickly and efficiently. And 3. Capital Bet Pro, designed especially for the professional horse player. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Monday morning. Monday morning means a visit from Mike Penna of the Horse Racing Radio Network. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Seth. Good morning.
And did you get back safely? I understand Horse Racing Radio Network. Were you live from Gulfstream, correct?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we went down on Thursday and were there for the races on Saturday and covered the Fountain of Youth and the Risen Star on the network, and also included coverage of the Devona Dale and Canadian Turf. But really good racing, of course, in New Orleans and certainly at Gulfstream Park, so it was great to be there. The weather cooperated. It was in the mid-80s, a bit humid, but nobody was complaining because the card was sensational. And what a show in the Fountain of Youth. It was a really, really good race.
Yeah, we'll hit on those races, certainly. And, the weather, we had Ron Nicoletti on with us Friday. I said, what's the weather look like for Friday and Saturday? He said, how should I put it? Perfect. And, and then he said 80s. I said, yeah, you got it. Yeah, we're still up here in upstate New York struggling through the throes of winter. So it's fun to watch Gulfstream and see those 80-degree temperatures. And it must be even more fun to go down and spend a little time there. And Mike, before we get into it, always like to recap some of the action on Horse Racing Radio Network if folks want to visit the website and pull up some of the archives. I noted you had both of the winning trainers on ahead of the 3-year-old races, both the winning trainer of the Fountain of Youth and the Risen Star. And a little earlier in the week on Trainer Talk, you had a couple of interesting trainers there as well.
Yeah, we did. Trainer Talk the previous week featured John Terranova and a replay of our interview with Bill Gowan for the second half of the program. And if folks haven't gotten an opportunity to go back and hear their stories, they really should do that. The podcast is up on our website at horseracingradio.net. All of our Trainer Talk shows are podcast there. And so many interesting stories. The background stories with all of these trainers are just fascinating. So if people get a chance to do that. And that interview with Jose Garofalo, who of course trained Wildcat Red to victory in the Fountain of Youth, is on our homepage, along with our extensive interview with Todd Pletcher. And if folks missed that, they'll want to go back and listen because he was so candid. And he talked about not only Intense Holiday, who of course won at the fairgrounds, but he talked about all of his other big-name 3-year-olds as well. So good stuff from Todd Pletcher.
Excellent. And again, if folks go to the Horse Racing Radio Network website, they can find all of that. Mike, let's dip right into the racing, and we'll start out with some of that action over at Gulfstream that you were live on site for. Want to go to the undercard, get some of your thoughts on Normandy Invasion. Talked about this horse earlier today and yesterday as well. And I mentioned in a race like this, I don't know what he beat, but he did it in such a fashion that I think Normandy Invasion signaled he's back and he's going to be an interesting player in the handicap division. We'll watch the stretch run here in Normandy Invasion. Not difficult to pick out. He'll be the number 1 horse under Javier Castellano, who had a stellar afternoon on Saturday.
Yeah, they really picked the right day to give out the Javier Castellano bobblehead because Javier was on fire. I think he would prefer that they did that every day if he's going to win 6 races on the card. Chad Brown, what a tremendous job he did bringing Normandy Invasion back to the races on Saturday. This was his first start since finishing that very gutsy 4th in the Kentucky Derby last May. So it had been a long time since Normandy Invasion had seen any action. And you're right, I don't think he beat much in this race. He really towered over his competition. He wasn't running against the Mucho Macho Mans of the world and the Game On Dudes and the Will Take Charges. But he did it the right way. And I think Chad was just looking to see if he was back to being the old Normandy Invasion that we saw in his juvenile campaign. And he certainly looked as good as ever, probably even better than he looked at 2 and at 3. And he came back as a man and loved the way he won. Javier did a nice job just guiding him around the track. It was an easy victory for him. And I think you're right. I think that depending on how he continues to develop and comes out of this race, we can look for him to be a player in this handicap division.
Yeah, he did it in such a way that certainly signals he is back. And he wasn't maybe racing against particularly good rivals, but racing against the clock perhaps with a very good time. So he's going to be fun to watch going forward. One other undercard race I want to touch on, just get your thoughts on Constitution in that allowance optional claimer for 3-year-olds. I mean, what a salty undercard race that was. Constitution wins. Toneless, who I liked going into that race, given the way the track played, he didn't make up much ground in the stretch, but it was hard to do that. I think he'll be interesting watching going forward. And I thought it was an okay race as well, running 3rd. Mexicoma off of the layoff from the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. So I thought the top 3 in there were all ones that will be interesting going forward.
Yeah, I think so too. And as impressive as Constitution was, and he ran a great race, I think you have to give a little more credence to the horses finishing behind him because of the fact that racetrack was so speed favoring, almost a conveyor belt when you got to the front. It was very hard for the late runners to make up any ground. And Mexicoma, who ended up finishing 3rd, had a really difficult post position, breaking from the outside, and was able to overcome a somewhat tardy early part of the race for him where he really wasn't involved, and then did finish up pretty well. And again, just to be able to finish on that track is an accomplishment, and I think they have to be pleased with the way that he came back.
Yeah, in Constitution, I said it yesterday, Todd Pletcher's horses can often freak down there a little bit at Gulfstream Park. So 2 for 2 now at Gulfstream, 2 for 2 in the career. But Constitution, I think I probably want to see one from away from Gulfstream Park. And not to say this is not going to be a very good horse. I just want him to prove how good he is away from Gulfstream before I jump on the bandwagon there.
Yeah, and he had things his own way on the front end, too, and keep that in mind. He was able to control the pace, and again, on that racetrack, if you're able to do that, it's almost impossible to be beat.
Yeah. Flip side of that is Only For You in the Devona Dale. We'll watch the stretch run here. Number 3, Only For You, now 4 for 4 in her career after the weekend win. Again, she's the number 3. Number 5, House Rules, will run second for Alan Jerkins, and Aurelia's Bell, the number 4 horse, will run third. But a nice win for Only For You. The time doesn't jump off the board at you, certainly. But again, as opposed to Constitution, this is a horse that has already won somewhere else for Todd Pletcher. I think, and again, the time may not be much to crow about, but she's doing it the right way. I think she'll be a player in this division.
Yeah, and, she figured coming out of her sprint races, those 3 consecutive sprints to begin her career, she figured to be forwardly placed, if not on the lead, going a mile and a 16th and stretching out. And another situation where this filly was able to control the pace and kind of dictate to her rivals what was going to happen throughout the running of the race, and she just proved too classy in the end. I was really disappointed in the performance from Stop Charging Maria. I expected more from her. Didn't necessarily surprise me that she didn't win this race, because coming off of the layoff and making her 3-year-old debut, you kind of question whether she'd be 110% fully cranked. But with the way that she ran in her juvenile campaign, you thought, okay, she should be in the mix somewhere. And I know she was going to be coming from a little further back, but it was very disappointing with her effort.
Yeah, she winds up finishing 5th in the field of 8. I will also mention, because we talked a little bit about it on Friday with Ron Nicoletti, Penwith wound up running 4th in there, and we talked a little bit on Friday about that horse because, according to Ron, he thought that Penwith was going to be first-time Lasix on Saturday, and that was the case. And with McLaughlin and Darley, that has been a solid MO over the past few months, but Penwith could go no better than 4th on Saturday. So just wanted to bring that up because we talked about it on Friday. All right, let's look out at the Fountain of Youth. I liked Wildcat Red. I talked about the horse quite a bit last week, and Wildcat Red coming out of the nice win in the Hutchison. 2 starts back had been a close-up second behind General A-Rod in the Mile Gulfstream Park Derby, cut back to 7 furlongs in the Hutchison, won pretty easily there. Now, how far will this horse stretch out? I don't know, but I thought down at Gulfstream, a mile and a 16th would be well within the scope of Wildcat Red. I didn't quite see the ding-dong battle between Wildcat Red and General A-Rod early, and I thought, even given the way the track was playing, they had license to give it up in the stretch, but boy, they kept going. We'll watch the stretch run here, and it'll be number 4, Wildcat Red, number 5, General A-Rod, will ding-dong it out all the way to the wire with Wildcat Red just getting the bob. Now, given all that, as we watch the stretch run, tough to make up ground in the stretch, but I think Top Billing does a pretty good job. So I like the top 2 horses, but I certainly give credit to Top Billing in the 3rd place finish, given the way the track was playing.
Yeah, there were 3 horses that I really had my eye on in the Fountain of Youth, and 3 horses that I quite frankly liked in this spot, and they were Wildcat Red, General A-Rod, and Top Billing. They end up 1, 2, 3, and that's not to toot my own horn, because I'm sure a lot of people like those 3 horses. I was most impressed with Top Billing because of the fact that, again, as we talked about, this was a conveyor belt of a speed-favoring racetrack, and he was able to make his typical move where he put himself in contention coming to the quarter pole, and then was still gaining ground at the end. And if this race is a mile and an 1/8, like we're going to see in the Florida Derby at the end of March, I think that he certainly gets to the top 2 and wins a race like that. So Shug McGaughey will now have some decisions to make. Does he bring him to a race like the Wood Memorial at Aqueduct that may or may not suit his style a bit better, or does he keep him at a track that he knows he likes and say, okay, a mile and an 1/8 is a different ball game. We're going to go ahead and give that race a shot and keep him on his home court, so to speak. So still has some decisions to make with Top Billing. I'm probably as high on him now as I have ever been, even though he was beaten. But tip your hat to Wildcat Red and General A-Rod. Both horses digging in, gutsy efforts. You're right, the pedigree of Wildcat Red says that he's not supposed to go any further than a mile and a 16th, and even that could be a stretching it a bit. But when you look at the fractions, that's 23 flat for the opening quarter, 46.25 for the half. They ran, and they ran every step of the way and had every right to quit, and they never did. So really nice effort and a great story with Jose Garofalo. This is the best horse he's ever trained. And if that interview, if folks haven't heard it, it's on our website. Well worth a listen.
Yeah, and Jenny Reese was on yesterday, and she said Jose was part of the NTRA teleconference last week, and she said he seems like a really nice guy, really easy to root for.
Yeah, very much so. And a native of Venezuela, during the interview that he did with us on Saturday morning on the Equine Forum show, he actually spent a few minutes talking about the turmoil in Venezuela now, and just reassured his fellow countrymen that everything would be okay. And he told us his family is doing okay, so he was happy about that. And he's just trying to stay focused on this horse right now, even though he has those outside distractions at home. He's just trying to stay focused on the horse. And he said, we can actually have an opportunity now to go to the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
And that's what this sport's all about.
Absolutely. That would be a nice punctuation on that story. Mike, let's shift over to Fairgrounds now. Before we get to the Risen Star, just get some thoughts on the Rachel Alexandra. As noted earlier, only for you, time-wise, maybe didn't stack up to the boys over at Gulfstream Park. Untappable, though, for Asmussen and Winchell under Rosie Napravnik. Wins off by over 9 lengths and does so in a time that was faster than the boys. She is certainly a player in that 3-year-old filly division.
Yeah, she is. She looked the part, and she looks like she's the one to beat right now off of that performance. And, hey, the Fairgrounds and those races, those 3-year-old filly races in the spring have proven to be productive in terms of producing a Kentucky Oaks winner. So Untappable is one that people will keep an eye on. And I think that she now stamps herself as the one to beat on the first Friday in May.
Yeah, she was very impressive. All right, let's go out and look at the boys. We're going to watch the stretch run. Albano, very gutsy, holding on for second here, but does get run down by number 9, Intense Holiday. Albano's going to be the number 1 horse. Running third will be number 14, Vickers in Trouble, who left from the 13 hole, so kind of was up against it early on. So the third place finish, no disgrace for Vickers in Trouble. But the first two, very nice efforts. Again, Intense Holiday just gets up under, riding for Todd Pletcher, Mike Smith. There's a team you don't see too often. And I wonder, when you had Pletcher on the show, A, did he talk about reaching out to Mike Smith? And B, more importantly, did he talk at all about the decision to go over to Fairgrounds? Because I think, given the way Gulfstream is playing, that there are lots of decisions, particularly heading into the Florida Derby, for folks like Mark Casse with Conquest Titan. And certainly Starlight and Todd Pletcher made absolutely the right decision on Saturday.
Yeah, they really did. And no, he did not talk about the Mike Smith decision, but yeah, he did talk about the decision to run him at the Fairgrounds as opposed to keeping him at Gulfstream or going someplace else. And he told us that he was disappointed in the trips that this horse had in his previous races. He found himself a bit far back in some of those races, and yeah, he came running at the end, but he was just, really not, he wasn't gaining on the horses that were in front of him the way that Todd would have liked. So I think he felt the change of scenery, a different racetrack, long stretch at the Fairgrounds, might be the perfect opportunity for this horse to show what he can do. And I know he's been high on him for a long time, and you're right, he made the absolute correct decision, and that's why he has 6 Eclipse Awards. He's Todd Pletcher.
That's right. And again, I thought behind Albano was very interesting. Vickers in Trouble. I was a little bit interested in Gold Hawk coming into this race. The 5th place finish now combined with the last race, I'm a little bit disappointed. But there was, I just, at the top of the show, looked at an article from the Racing Forum where Asmussen admits he just seems maybe a little bit out of sync, and they'll perhaps come back in the Louisiana Derby with Gold Hawk. So I won't give up completely on that one yet, but certainly Intense Holiday, Albano, and Vickers in Trouble, legitimate on the Derby trail. Mike, as always, we appreciate the visit. Oh, before I let you go, because after the break, I'm going to show that last race from Gulfstream on Saturday. I just want to give folks a chance to look at that. The DQ there, which left one person very, very disappointing. There was one ticket alive with the horse that came under the finish line first in the Rainbow Six, and then gets disqualified and loses over $1 million. Boy, there is a tough DQ. But I'm wondering if you had a chance to look at that and what your thought. I thought it was a legitimate DQ. I wonder if you looked and had an opinion.
You know, truthfully, I have not. I have not gone back to watch the race. We were still broadcasting the Risen Star at that point, so we were still on the air covering that race from the fairgrounds, so I haven't seen it. But I was sick for that one person that had the ticket, and I'm just kind of curious if they have gone and looked underneath all the bridges in the Gulfstream Park area, because I know if it was me, they'd probably be looking for me underneath them, I'm sure.
And I would encourage people to really think of that scenario, because I think the same thing. I think I would be devastated for about a week. I wouldn't be able to leave my house. Yeah, you have $1 million in your pocket, essentially. And it was almost as brutal yesterday. Yesterday, the horse that took the lead with 200 yards to go or less was a lone ticket winner, and the horse that he had passed comes back and gets him at the wire. So there was 2 in a row, but the DQ, very, very tough. But again, Mike, we appreciate the visit, as always. Again, tout people to go over to the Horse Racing Radio Network website, pull up some of the archives. Again, appreciate the visit this week, and we'll talk to you again next Monday.
Thanks, Seth. We'll talk to you then.
All right, Mike Penna from the Horse Racing Radio Network. We'll take our next break. When we come back, we will take a quick look at that DQ just to give folks a look who haven't seen it yet. When we do that, we'll take another break, and then towards the end of the show, again, it's Andy Serling, New York Racing Association. We'll talk some New York racing, get some of his opinions on the weekend stakes as well. All of that after this.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Funding your Capital OTB Bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today. Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. Just a quick segment now. Just did want to show that DQ from Saturday, which cost one bettor over $1 million. We're going to watch both the pan and the head-on. The number 12, Colanito, is going to be first under the line. That would have paid. That horse winds up getting disqualified. Number 13, Strategic Keeper, will run second. You see the stretch run here. 12 pays. 13 doesn't. 13 will wind up getting moved up after the DQ. And what happens is the 12 comes out and impedes the progress of the number 13. You get a better look at that on the head-on. As I said yesterday on Loose on the Lead when I was talking to Steve Bick, my partner, he agreed. He thought it was a legitimate DQ. I always say when I look at these DQs, I kind of put them in percentages. It's 50-50 or it's 60-40. And you can see there, the horse is clearly coming out, comes out, and then right in front of the other horse. And I think that took away the path. And given the fact that the horse came up and loses the race by a neck, did this make a neck's difference? I think you can make the argument that it did. And again, percentage-wise, For me, this was about a 75-25 in favor of a DQ, maybe even an 80-20. Now, subsequently, Andy Beyer has written about this in the Washington Post, talks a little bit about it. He quotes Tim Ritvo, the track president, as the inquiry sign comes up, saying, either way, this is a disaster, because I'm sure he envisioned if it's the lone winner, the track now doesn't get that rollover and the nice juice that presents. But if there is a DQ, I'm sure he anticipated what social media and whatnot. There was an outcry. Oh, it was fixed, and they wanted the Rainbow Six pool to continue. And the Beyer article goes and finds some comments about of the DQ on the internet. He quotes some of the forums out there. Has one quote that says, from a person on one of these racing forums who says, I watched the replay about 90 times now. Absolutely horrible call. This stinks to high heaven. And I just don't see, I can get it if somebody looks and says, I wouldn't have made the DQ. As I say, I'm not 100%. I'm 75-25 or 80-20. But boy, if you really think this is like a 100% in favor of a non-DQ, I don't think you can look at it I don't think you could take 100 reasonable, racing knowledgeable people and think none of them would have said that was a disqualification. So the outrage and things like absolutely horrible call, I just can't see. Subsequently, though, the Beyer article goes down and he gets some quotes from Chuck Striva, who is a chart caller for Equibase and wrote the footnotes on the race. And Striva says, I thought the disqualification was a no-brainer. Beyer then goes on to say it might not have been a no-brainer, but the DQ was warranted. So Beyer agrees. There was an article also, or a blog post from our friend Dean Towers, who writes the Pull a Pocket blog. And he asked some good questions in relation to this, into the system of inquiries and how it's transparent to the public. It's just kind of maybe an anachronism or a little bit antiquated in this country, and we can look out at places like he points out Hong Kong, and where you pull up a steward's report and you really get a nice full explanation. And he makes the case, and it's the case I've made before, we maybe have to step up, and he says how hard is it to set standards, how hard is it to establish some form of consistency, how difficult is it to do what Hong Kong does and explain it better to the bettors. And I agree, I've called a long time for a stewards report, daily stewards report on racetrack websites that really is comprehensive. Let us know how the stewards voted on disqualifications, what people said, what the jockeys said and whatnot. Love to see something like that. And so I kind of agree, and that can get tied into this. But again, just wanted to let folks see that DQ. Cost somebody $1 million. You got to feel for the guy. And according to the Beyer article, there were eventually eight winning tickets. So obviously it's the jackpot bet. It only pays off the whole pool to one better, if there's one better. So with 8, it was a consolation bet, but it still paid $36,000. So I hope at least the gentleman or gentlewoman who lost the disqualification, I certainly hope they had a ticket. $36,000 as compared to $1 million, it would still hurt, but at least it would take a little bit of the sting out. But there you have it. And again, yesterday, the bettor lost in the shadow of the wire when a horse just came back on his and got up there. And that one, 20-cent pick 6 jackpot bet yesterday at Gulfstream Park, $141,000. Now again, it was not an easy sequence. $54, $8, $41, $19, $12, and $9 would have been tough to have. But it just goes to show you, I mean, a tough sequence pays $141. A logical sequence is still going to be a nice payoff. This bet, now that it's gotten up there, for 20 cents, you can jump in and put together a nice little ticket. And if things turn out logical, you could be, as opposed to the whales, you can be a minnow and maybe come up with some decent prices. Although, given where it's reached now, the whales are jumping in. We don't know how long this will last. So make the most of it while it is still floating out there. All right, we'll take our last break for the hour. When we come back, Andy Serling from the New York Racing Association. Stay tuned.
Funding your Capital OTB bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Here in upstate New York, no one provides bettors with more wagering options than Capital OTB. Our network of branch and easy bet locations stretches from the mid-Hudson Valley all the way to the Canadian border and west to central New York. So whether you need to place a bet, fund your Capital Bets account, or watch the next big race, all the action is just around the corner. A full list of our branch and easy bet locations can be found online at CapitalOTB.com. Capital OTB, the better and most convenient choice for wagering in upstate New York.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Wagering at CapitalOTBBet.com is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Capital Bet TV, the fastest and easiest online wagering experience where you can monitor 5 different tracks simultaneously. 2. Capital Bet Express. Its straightforward program layout and interactive handicapping information lets you build your wager quickly and efficiently. And 3. Capital Bet Pro, designed especially for the professional horse player. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Monday morning. Monday now means racing in New York, and so we're happy to be joined now by Andy Serling of the New York Racing Association, as well as now Fox commentator Andy Serling. Good morning, Andy.
Morning. How are you guys doing?
Very good. And let's take a look. I want to get some of your, boy, it was a nice weekend as far as the 3-year-olds and some other horses, some interesting horses that certainly will show up in New York probably sooner rather than later. So I want to get some thoughts on some of that stakes action as well as some of the allowance events over the weekend. But before we do that, get some of your thoughts on racing this afternoon at Aqueduct. You got 3 for us, starting out in the 4th. 4th race today is a optional claiming event, 16 tags, non-winners of 3 lifetime, going a mile. Horses that I found interesting in here, House on Toilsome, I think on the numbers, nice improving numbers is kind of interesting. And Midnight and Positano, Lone Speed maybe in that one. How'd you see this race?
Well, I mean, you do have 3 horses, including two that you mentioned. They're coming back from a race here on Friday, and even though it was foggy out, it did appear to me that at least in the stretch, the rail was not the place to be, and I think the horse that was most affected by that was Midnight and Positano. Having said that, I don't like her chances in this race. I think the speed is supposed to be Mrs. Calabash in here. Okay. Now, maybe you get some from New York Conspiracy, and maybe Midnight and Positano does go as the sprinter stretching out, but Mrs. Calabash, actually, who had some trouble early in that race, just got a terrible ride, in my opinion, and was wide to nowhere and in a paceless race, was given absolutely no chance in her return off a layoff of going on almost 6 months. And I think she's a very dangerous horse. Now, she doesn't need to have the lead. If she can sit in a contending position, maybe 2nd or 3rd in here, unfortunately probably a little overbet because of Taylor Rice, I thought that she's the right horse in here and add some more rest. I mean, the truth is, the speed here is finder's key. I just don't think these connections and this rider is going to send enough from post 9. If she was my horse, I'd tell him to go as fast as you could to get the lead. But I think that you'll see Miss Calabash as maybe the one that you want in here.
Yeah, in this day and age, I can't figure out why every trainer and owner doesn't say that for every race. Just go out of the gate and send. Nobody's going to go with you.
I don't understand when speed became such a bad thing in racing. And you look at a race like the Barbara Fritchie last weekend, had Rajiv Mirage and Mike Nush not been aggressive with Maiwandi's girl, she would not have beaten La Verdad because La Verdad would have set her own pace. And by being aggressive, they were able to win a $300,000 race.
Yeah, it's just, it's very frustrating as a bettor to see, because there are some races where your horse just never gets a chance. There's a couple of horses out in the front end just kind of floating along, and you're screaming at the television screen, go, go, and you just never get a shot. And
I don't understand it. And you see horses that perform so much better when they're allowed to run to their running style, free running on the front end, even if they're going faster. As Rich Migliore likes to say, it's not how fast you're going, it's how you're going fast.
Yeah, exactly. All right, fifth race this afternoon is optional claimer, 70 tags, non-winners of one other than. They're going 6 furlongs in here. Alpaca Fina obviously getting the class relief for
that's the seventh race is not Alpaca Fina. That's the third race.
Oh, I was
scratched, by the way.
I was reading I had written down 5, but then I crossed it out and wrote 7. Yeah, you exactly.
She scratched Alpaca Fina, by the way.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Seventh race today is a starter allowance at the 50 level, and in this one they're going to go a mile. Anaphylaxis. When I looked,
he scratched. Unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
I didn't like him at all.
Well, yeah, I was going to say on the numbers, that one was going to take a lot of action. Odeon on the layoff for John Sheriff's. Interesting to me on the switch over to the main track, but given that this horse has never been on the main track, there's some question marks there. I thought In My Father's Image on the outside for Rudy Rodriguez was a little bit interesting. What did you see?
Yeah, I'm very, very interested in Ruthless Alley in here. I mean, this is a horse that has completely turned his career around since going from turf to dirt. I mean, to me, very rarely you see these horses that have spent their careers in the turf go to the dirt and improve. But both of his races since doing so have been very good. I mean, he shocked the field at almost 60-1 back in December, but he ran very well that day in a contested pace and holding off the closers. And then he comes back last time, and he's wide to nowhere with a relatively inexperienced bug rider and almost held off the closers in a race that completely collapsed. I mean, Finn's Quest got the perfect trip. Anaphylaxis made the big run and was interfered with in the stretch, but Ruthless Alley only lost by a length. And if you look at the other speeds, one of them was Barrister Jim, who finished way back, and he came back to win at Laurel at 7-2, and the other horse, NDC, improved his figure 5 points in running second after finishing 7th in that race. So this was a much better race, I think, than even looks on paper, and a race good enough to win here. And unless Samaverless on the outside gets a very aggressive ride by Abel Castellano, I think this horse should be in a reasonably controlling position. And even if the other horse goes, I think he should be in a good spot here inside of him. And I like Ruthless Alley. I think he's a completely new horse since going to the dirt.
Yeah, I had the previous jockey circled, being the apprentice, but I just wasn't sure it was a super positive move to the new jockey as well from the inside post position.
He's obviously struggling a lot, but hopefully he'll just do the right thing and go towards the front. And he's a speed horse with the rail. It shouldn't be a hard thing to do. If you're riding in New York, you should at least be able to do that. Though sometimes I wonder.
All right, we'll look out now at the 8th race. State-bred allowance event, non-winners are one other than. They're going 1 mile and 70. Started up off the last race, looks kind of live in here. The horse that I found interesting was the number 5, Once a Week, for Mike Hushion. I'm going to have to step it up, obviously, but with only 3 career starts, and maybe the last one was a little bit of a light bulb moment, that one attracted my attention a little bit.
Well, Mike has good numbers stretching out off the wins in general and even maiden wins, and Maggie's always felt this was a horse that probably wanted more distance, and I'm certainly going to be using her. But there's 2 horses. I mean, Human Candy's, I think, going to be the favorite here, and deservedly so. Both Human Candy and Milky Your Way had very wide trips on January 25th. And January 25th and 6th were significant, strong gold rails, and horse with wide trips, obviously, have done well coming out of those races, and they were both severely compromised. If Human Candy can get back to the races 2 and 3 back, I think she's the horse to beat here. And Milky Your Way never seems to get it done, but she'll be a much bigger price, so they're the 2 I'm interested in, along with Once a Week.
All right. And as noted, wanted to get some of your thoughts on some of the weekend action. And as I say, some of these are horses that we'll certainly see in New York at some point in the year. And one of those I want to touch on was on the undercard on Gulfstream. What were your thoughts on Normandy Invasion, the comeback? I said already earlier today, I don't know what he beat, but he certainly did it in a fashion that says should be an interesting player in the handicap division.
Yeah, it would be nice if he did it at a racetrack that had an ability to time their races properly, but getting proper times of race at Gulfstream has been a problem going back, at least since I was going there, for the whole meet back in the mid-'90s. And he got one time, and then the trackers, I think, reported a new track record that he smashed by over 3/5 of a second, one that was set by commentator. Judging by the horses that finished behind him in the race, it's very hard to believe that time, especially if you look at it, I think, in context of the other races. So there seems to be some question, but hopefully they'll get that sorted out. Right now they're using a track record time. Regardless, he was certainly eased down and probably could have won by a few more lengths in there. He was very, very impressive. Listen, I'm a huge fan of this horse. There's no question he's going to have to go out on the racetrack and beat good horses before we can say that he's a true star in this game. But if you look at the other horses that were involved in the pace in the Kentucky Derby and what they did, they were horses like Oxbow, Palace Malice, Golden Sense, and Verrazano. All four horses that were involved in the pace somewhat in that race have come back and been Grade 1 winners, if not multiple Grade 1 winners. And Normandy Invasion ran the best race, really by far, of any of those horses. And he's the only one yet to come. And I think if he stays sound and he has a full season, we're going to see a horse that's going to be a force in this handicap division. But there are some other very good horses out there as well.
Yeah, he just adds his name to, as you say, what is shaping up to be a fun division this year. Another fun division, obviously, particularly at this time of year, the 3-year-olds. What were your thoughts on the Fountain of Youth? I liked Wildcat Red coming into this race. I don't know how he's going to stretch out, and I will say the horse that I think a lot of people are tipping their cap to in defeat is Top Billing, and I'll relate that again back to New York, because Shug McGahee is now saying the Wood Memorial is a potential next stop for Top Billing.
Yeah, I don't think we learned a lot about anybody in this race because the racetrack, which was playing so kindly to speed, clearly helped the first two finishers in here. And I don't think any of us are taking them seriously as mile and a quarter horses. I take them seriously as talented horses, and I absolutely believe the winner of this race is a very dangerous horse for races like the King's Bishop. I think he's extremely talented. I just don't think we learned from this race that we've seen Kentucky Derby type horses. And keep in mind, it was a very fast pace. I mean, they went about 1 1/4 seconds faster than the sixth race, which is a very strong non-winners of one optional claiming allowance race that we can touch on. So with this very fast pace, they were still able to hold on. And Top Billing, if you look at track, has covered actually less ground than the second finisher who sat in the 2-path. Top Billing got a very, very good trip in this race. Yes, if it had been a fair racetrack, he probably would have won. But he would have won under the most ideal circumstances possible, a fast pace and a ground-saving trip. And I thought Joel Rosario did a very good job of getting him to the inside in the first turn without abruptly shifting to the inside. He got as good a ride as a rider could give, especially from that post. I think that way too much is being made at Top Billing, and if you compare this race to the sixth race, where there was this monstrously slow pace, yet Mexicoma, who had an outside post and a much wider trip, was still able to close in for third, albeit beaten 5.5 lengths as opposed to the 2 that Top Billing lost by. You can't just say that every horse that made a run in the races ran this remarkable race. I think it's way too early to say that Top Billing is this horse you want for the Kentucky Derby. He's got a great trainer, a trainer that improves horses, but he's also a horse that started out relatively precocious, and I'm just not convinced that this is a horse that's going to be hugely successful in Kentucky. But closers do seem to have an advantage in the Derby that always has a fast pace.
Well, let's go back to that sixth race for a second, because I would like to get a couple of comments, on Constitution, because I know you and Jay a lot in the springtime. We'll talk about the Pletcher horses coming up from Gulfstream, and Constitution now impressive in 2 starts, but they've both been at Gulfstream, and the one that I liked going into the race and still like a little coming out of the race is Tonalist.
Yeah, I thought Tonalist ran terrific, and I am a guy who seems to focus too much on horses that lose races, but I think you learn much more about losers in races than you do about winners. We learned nothing about Constitution. We learned if on a speed track he's able to set a very moderate pace, he's capable of running a fast race. Wow, there's a shocker. I don't know about you. I'm just blown away by that. And he ran a fast race. He went a fifth of a second slower than the Fountain of Youth. But keep in mind, he ran about 1 1/4 seconds and 1 3/4 seconds slower to the half. He was setting a very tepid pace, where Tonalist was really ridden hard to keep pace 3 wide. And it's almost like they were so afraid of Constitution, but maybe Christophe Clement wanted to use this race to help his horse improve. I think when Tonalist gets an honest racetrack and a faster pace in front of him, and he can rate more comfortably, he could be a force, this horse. And I hope we see him in the Wood Memorial. Why can't Christophe come with him? I think after we saw this weekend, we'll see a lot of these trainers, especially New York-based, not want to be in the Florida Derby, afraid that something like this will happen again. So I think we could see him again. And if you like Tonalist, he lost nothing in defeat. And Mexicoma is another horse that showed that he, too, could be a player in this division because he put in a nice run considering the track and the pace.
Yeah, certainly, as you say, that track is going to make some of the other 3-year-old Derby Trail races become a little more attractive to connections. And one of those made the decision this weekend, and Andy, we only got about a minute left, but Starlight and Todd Pletcher ships over to Fairgrounds and wins with Intense Holiday with a nice stretch drive, getting up over a gutsy Albano. And the win by Intense Holiday off of the move out of the Holy Bull, maybe that flatters Cairo Prince and Conquest Titan as well.
It definitely flatters. Well, it flatters Cairo Prince, Conquest Titan. Good luck to him getting the same kind of good trips in the future. I thought Intense Holiday ran better than him. be losing to him in the Holy Bull. And congratulations to Jack Wolf and Todd Plesher being smart enough to get out of the speed bias, go to an easier spot, and collect the same purse and get it done. And, you know, the one thing you could say about Intense Holiday, I know it got a big figure. I still want to see him do it against better horses because I don't have a great deal of overall respect for the horses he beat at this point. But he's not one of these flashy Todd horses that showed some brilliance early and we think he's fizzling out. He's a horse that's taking a while to come into his own, and I think he's the kind of horse that could surprise people a little bit. I don't think he's good enough to be in the upper echelon of the division right now, but he's the kind of horse with his running style that things could work out well for him, especially in Kentucky. Not saying I think he's a winning type, but I wouldn't just dismiss him.
I also found it interesting that Todd reached out to Mike Smith. I don't remember seeing that combo before.
Maybe he figured Mike needs some help because, as well as he rode last year, Mike had not been riding as well this year in 2014. But, you know, one win can turn it all around for trainers, jockeys, and horse players alike.
Yeah, that was an interesting combination. All right, Andy, as always, appreciate the visit. Good luck this afternoon. We'll talk to you again.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Andy Serling from the New York Racing Association, as noted, also now Fox commentator as well. A little earlier on, Mike Penna from the Horse Racing Radio Network. That wraps us up for the week's opener, the Monday edition of Racing Across America. We're here every Monday through Friday from 10 until 11 a.m. A little earlier, handicapper support this morning was Anthony Mormino and myself. Hopefully we gave you some good ideas. So enjoy the racing this afternoon. Cash a few tickets. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.